Hello everyone, today we are going to be looking at this little powerful audio recorder, the Zoom H1n. So let's take a tour of the Zoom H1n. At the top here you've got your built-in XY stereo mic that you can use to record. If you're not using the stereo mic, you can use an external microphone by plugging into the 8-inch microphone input or line in. So this is where you can record using an external microphone, or if you're recording another device, this is where you plug it in. At the top, to control the levels, you've got your input volume dial or your gain control from 0 to 10. It's recommended that you try and keep your levels above 6, because below 6 you tend to get too much noise. The noise to signal ratio is not good, so try and keep your levels from 6 upwards as long as the signal is not clipping. And then you've got your screen, and once we power it on, we'll see what the screen looks like. And then you have these 4 dedicated buttons for audio, low cut, limiter, and auto level. And these buttons change function depending on what we are doing, and we'll look at that just in a minute. And then you have your record button. That's what you use to start and stop a recording. And then you have your controls here for playback and fast forward, rewind for reviewing your files, stop. And this stop button also acts as an option button. So when you press it, you'll see in a moment, it's going to give you some options that you can change. You've got your little speaker at the bottom there, not very useful, but if you just want to play back your audio, you can listen to it through the speaker, but I'd recommend that you use headphones for better sounding audio. So let's go back to this side and see what we have. We have the micro SD slot. This Zoom uses micro SD as the recording media, and it says micro SD HC, so you can use HC and above in terms of speed. And then on the left here, you've got your trash icon. This is what you use to delete files. And then you have your power button. When you slide it to the left, it's going to power the unit on. When you slide it to the right, it's going to lock your controls so that you don't make any changes by mistake when you're recording. Now, when you press the trash icon and you keep it pressed as you turn on the unit, it's going to go into setting mode. And then you have your USB port, and this is what you use to either power it on using an optional adapter, or for transferring files from the unit into your computer. And it can also be used for using this Zoom as an audio interface if you're going to be using an audio recording software on your computer. This can be used to get that signal directly into that software. And then on the other side, we've got our headphone out or line out. This is where you connect your headphones to monitor what you are recording or playback. And you can also use it to connect this to an external recorder or external mixer to send a signal to those devices. You have your controls for volume right here, and this controls just the volume of this output. It doesn't control the recording. So you have to be really careful, because sometimes you can have your monitoring volume very loud and think that you are having a good signal. But when you look at the display, you actually have a low signal. So just remember, this is just for your headphones. And then at the back, you have your battery compartment, and this is powered by 2 AAA batteries. And that's if you're not powering it using the DC output. So 2 AAA batteries will power this. Let's go ahead and see how this actually works. The first thing you want to do is to put in your SD card, and it goes in the pin side up, and you just slot it in there and press it in until it clicks, and then you close the bay. And then You power the unit on by sliding this to the right, to the left, and the unit powers on. So let's look at the display for a moment and see what we have. So the first thing you have at the top there that says no file is your file name. On the right, you have your remaining battery charge. And then you have this little SD card icon. When you are doing an operation, this will show you the status, whether you're doing playback or you're recording. Next thing you have is your counter. Your counter tells you when you're recording. So if I press record, the counter tells you how much time has elapsed or how long your file is. When you stop recording, the counter tells you how much time you have on the SD card to record. Next, you have your level meters, and this tells you how loud your input signal is. And right at the end there, you've got your clipping indicators. You never want your audio to go to the extreme right. The clipping indicators tell you that your audio is distorting, and so you have to be careful with the audio levels. So if I put this all the way up, you can see the clipping indicators filling up. That means the audio is distorted. Next, you have your function buttons that by default are dedicated to the first one. It's all recording format. So when I press it, you see it says record format. And if you keep pressing it, it cycles through different recording formats. This unit has 9 different recording formats. I'd recommend that you use either 48K 16-bit wave or 48K 24-bit wave. It takes up a bit more space in terms of recording than MP3s, but you get better quality sound. The next button is your low cut, and this is what you use to reduce noise, low frequency noise. So this is where wind frequencies lie. And so if you are in a windy environment, you want to turn this on, and you have 3 options. You can have off, and you have 3 options: 80 Hertz or 120 Hertz or 160 Hertz. Now 80 is good enough for most things. It cuts off all the low frequencies where your vocals do not present. That makes your vocal a bit clearer. When you start going up to 120 and 160, you start going into the frequencies where your voice lies, and so that might not be good because it cuts off some frequencies in the voice, and you end up with very thin sounding audio. So I'd recommend that you work with 80 Hertz. The limiter is something that you want to use when you think you're going to have unexpected high sounds. It basically has just an on and an off option. When it's on, the limiter is going to make sure that nothing goes into the clipping zone. So no matter how loud anything goes, if I turn this all the way up and talk or make a sound, you can see the levels are not going into this zone, which is clipping. So if you're working in an environment where the level of the audio is unpredictable, you may want to turn that limiter on. But if you are in a controlled environment and you've set your levels well, just keep this off. Sometimes it can introduce some noise when the input sensitivity is high. And then the last dedicated button is your auto level. So when it is on, the recording levels is set automatically by the recorder. You may want to have it on auto level if you are doing some what we call run and gun. This is where you have no control of the audio. You're just running around recording stuff, and you want fairly good audio, but you can't keep adjusting your audio using this. So you put it on auto, and the device sets your levels for you as you go. The downside of this is when the signal is low, the unit will try and raise the level of the signal up, and you end up with noise in the signal. And when it's on auto level, you can't use the manual controls. If you try, it's going to tell you turn the auto level off to use. If you're starting out and you're not comfortable with audio, then just keep this on auto level and that will be good enough. When you're using this unit for the first time and you're using an SD card for the first time, you might want to access settings so that you can change different things. So on the side here, first of all, we're going to switch this off. So it's off. And then you press this trash icon, hold it down as you turn the unit on. And it's going to go into the settings mode. And these 4 buttons in the settings mode are going to be your exit button and your navigation buttons for the different items. So when I'm in setting mode, I can set the date and time. If I go this way, it allows you to set my date and time and the date format. Let me get out of there. The next one that the next item you can change is your LCD. So if I go into there, it's going to allow me to change the backlight. And that allows me to change how long the backlight is going to be on. If you are wanting to save power, then keep that at a minimum. But if you want to keep the backlight on, then you just scroll down and keep it on. So I'm going to keep it on since I'm doing this demo. And then the contrast just allows you to change the contrast level for better clarity. I find this is not a very useful setting, but you can try it out and see if it changes for you. Go back this way. This is an important setting. The battery, you need to make sure that you set the correct battery that you're using in the unit. If you don't set this correctly, then the unit will not be able to judge how much battery is left accurately. So make sure whatever battery you have in there, you set the correct one. And then the next setting will be the auto power off, and this is what you use to set how many minutes before the Zoom turns off if it's not in use. Right now, if the auto power off is off, which means it's not going to turn off no matter how long I leave it on. So you might want to change this to 5, 10, 30 minutes, an hour. I'll just leave it on off for now. Next setting that we may want to change is your recording setting. So if you go into there, it tells you what counter you're going to be using, elapsed time or remaining time, and you can also change how the naming of the files is done, either Zoom and then the sequence of numbers, or you can do it by the date and time the audio file was recorded. So I'll go back, go to the next one, your SD card, and this is where you can format or test your card. So in this case, this is the first time I have this card in this recorder. So I go to format and then go up to execute, and it formats the card. And I recommend that if you're using a card for the first time in Zoom, go ahead and format it first. Once it's formatted, you can also test the card to see if it's going to work with the unit. You can do a full test or a quick test. So let's just do a quick test to show you what happens. Go up and execute. And it will go through the testing. And this card is okay, so I can use it. You can also do a more thorough test by going to full test. But let's go back. We've done the SD card. You can check what version software you are using. And in this particular one, it's 1.21 and 1.02. And you can change your language. By default, you have English and Chinese. And then you can factory reset if something goes wrong and your unit is acting up. You can always set it back to factory settings, and then you're back to date and time. So let's exit that. Now let's look at how you record on Zoom and some of the features that are available as you're recording. Like I said, you can use these stereo mics to record, or you can plug in an external mic on the side. Now the first thing you want to do is to set your levels. So if you're going to be recording using an instrument, you just play the instrument. If you're using a mic, just have someone talk continuously at the level that they're going to be talking at. And yeah, you watch the meters and adjust the levels using your audio levels. And then to start recording, you just press the record button. To stop recording, you can just press the record button again and recording stops, and your file has been recorded, the Zoom 0001.wave. You can see when you're recording, the LCD screen changes a bit. So if you start recording this first one that's labeled audio, up there is now labeled mark. And mark is used when you press it. It's going to place a marker on the audio, and that's used as a cue point. So if let me just put mark 2 at 20 something seconds, at 30 seconds, I'm going to put another mark. And when I stop recording and I start playback using the playback button, so now I can jump through the audio using these buttons from one mark to the other. So I can go like this, and it's going to jump to that 30-second mark. I can go backwards, and that's how you navigate through the marks. So if you're recording an interview, for example, this can be very useful, especially if you're doing long interviews and people are saying something interesting that you want to quickly jump to. When you're editing, you just press the mark button, and those marks also appear in your audio editing software. So you can navigate using marks on the Zoom itself or in your audio editing software. The other things that are available when you're playing back your file is your file information. So if I press on that, it tells you the file information like that. If I go back, you can also repeat your audio by pressing the repeat button, which is here. You can have repeat off, and you can have repeat for just this one file that you're playing, or you can have repeat for all the files that you're playing. Sometimes that's useful if you are transcribing something, or you are practicing music and you want to practice in a loop. And then finally, you can change the mode. And once you press the mode, you get these other options. One is the speed. So you can have the audio play at normal speed, or you can have it play at 1.5 speed, 2 times speed, 0.5 speed, all those different options. So we just want to keep it at 1. Next option that you have when you're playing back is your sound. And this is kind of a rudimentary EQ. You can have speech. When it's in speech, the unit equalizes your audio so that the speech is clearer. You can have a voice cut. You can have bass, rock, and off. I don't find this very useful, but it's a possibility. The next item that you have available in playback mode is repeat. And so this is used to repeat sections of your audio. So when you press it, it's going to mark a position in your audio, and then when you press it again, it's going to mark the second position. And so you can now repeat a section of your audio from A to B. Yeah, let's get rid of that and go backwards. And so that's the changes that happen when you are in playback mode on your screen. Right now the audio is paused. As you can see, your status symbol. So to stop it, you just press this button and you're back to this mode. Now we talked about the option a little bit. I told you that when you press this option button, you get some other options that are available on your screen. So if I press and hold this option button, my screen changes and now I have other advanced options that I can use. The first one is my auto record. And auto record mode is when you want the unit to start recording automatically on its own after it hears a sound. So let's do this. You can set to auto record off, or you can set it to minus 48 decibels. So if a sound that is at that level starts playing, your unit will start recording. And there are different levels that you can set it at. So you have 48, minus 24, minus 12, and minus 6, and then off. And you also have pre-record. This is when you want the unit to start recording a few seconds before you hit the record button. This is useful when the recording that you're doing starts kind of abruptly and maybe you're not quite set. You might want to set that to on, and when it's on, it's going to record a few seconds of audio that happened before you pressed the record button. So it's always listening and keeping about a few seconds in the buffer so that when you have it on, yeah, you have that safety. The other thing you can do is use the self timer, and you can have it off 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and back to off. This is a setting that you use if you want to press record and then get yourself positioned, and then the recording starts after that many seconds. Now, self timer will not work if pre-record is on. And then the last one is your sound marker, and your sound marker can be useful. This is a tone signal that the unit sends from this line out. So you can connect this to your camera, and this helps when you are syncing audio. So when you're recording the audio for video, you can send that output signal to the camera, and you can use it to sync the audio and the video later on. So this can be on or it can be off. The other thing you can do with this recorder is what is called overdubbing, and this is when you record over a file as it is playing back, and this is useful for musicians. I've done a separate video looking into how you do overdubbing, but basically what you do is you record a foundation track, and once you've recorded the foundation track, you then press play and record at the same time, and you go into overdubbing mode and you listen through the headphones. You're going to hear the original track that you recorded, and you're going to record over that track. And what the Zoom does is it combines the foundation track with the overdub and creates a second track. And if you want to keep layering, you can keep doing that, and it keeps mixing the audio before it with the new audio. And It's kind of a rudimentary way of overdubbing because you're not able to create separate tracks of your different takes, but it's useful if you are a musician and maybe you just want to practice or make a demo track. You can use the overdubbing feature on this recorder. And that's the overview of the Zoom H1n. If I've missed something, let me know in the comments. If you have any questions, drop them down in the comments and I'll do my best to answer. But this is a very handy little recorder. It's a bit dated now, but it's still a good buy in 2026.